I always thought our marriage was unbreakable, until I discovered that my wife Sophia's business trip was actually a lie. I've been betrayed, and it seems like the whole world knew it but me. I sat on the couch, my mind spinning. After hearing what Sophia had just told me, she was heading overseas for a whole month on a business trip. She explained that her boss had entrusted her with a critical project, one she had to oversee personally. I tried to be supportive, even proud of her, but I couldn't shake the ache of knowing we'd be apart for so long. We'd been married just 3 years and had never spent this much time away from each other. We lived in a modest little house on the edge of Houston, renting, while we worked toward a down payment on a place of our own. It wasn't much, but it was cozy. We were both busy building our careers, putting in long hours to save every penny we could. Despite the stress, our teamwork made our relationship feel strong recently. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilgan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I noticed a change in Sophia. She was laser-focused on work, taking every opportunity to advance one night. Half joking, I asked her, why the sudden ambition? She smirked, her eyebrow arching playfully. Because I'm going to outturn you. Remember, we're in a competition. We both laughed it off, but her words stuck with me as I watched her pack with precision and determination. I wondered if there was more to it than I realized. Sophia was always driven, but this felt different. She talked about earning recognition at work and proving herself, but I couldn't help feeling like there was distance growing between us. I tried to make light of it. So, should I start expecting bigger checks soon? Monsieur, I joked. She laughed and rolled her eyes. You just wait. By the time I'm back, you'll be bragging about your star employee wife. Her confidence was infectious, and her hug reassured me for the moment. The morning of her departure was bittersweet. She zipped up her suitcase, double-checked her passport and ran through a list of essentials. Spain for a whole month sounded amazing, something we talked about doing together, but had never been able to afford. As we stood by the door, I gave her a warm smile. Spain sounds incredible. I hope you get to see some of it while you're there. Sophia grinned and brushed my arm. I'll bring back a little piece of it for you. Her tone light. We kissed, and I whispered, good luck with everything. Love you. She looked at me one last time, with that familiar, loving smile, before walking out the door. The first week without Sophia was uneventful. We exchanged quick texts. Her updates about work were brief, but upbeat. She sounded busy, and I was happy. Things were going well for her, even though I missed her more than I expected. By the weekend, I decided to restock the fridge and headed to a large grocery store across town. I wandered the aisles, mentally ticking off items on my list, when a familiar voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Adam, hey, it's been ages. I turned and saw Olivia, a friend from college. Her energy was as lively as ever, and she greeted me with her trademark sunny smile. Olivia, it's been so long. How are you? Genuinely happy to see her. Great, just got back from Miami. Funny, running into your back already. Her words confused me. Back from where she tilted her head, giving me a puzzled look. Miami. I ran into Sophia there a few days ago with some guy she mentioned. You were there too, relaxing with friends. My smile faltered. I forced out a chuckle to mask my surprise. Oh, right. Work's been crazy since we got back. I mumbled. Olivia nodded, sympathetically. Well, don't overdo. It was great seeing Sophia. Take care. Adam. She waved and disappeared down the aisle, leaving me rooted in place. My mind raced. Sophia was supposed to be in Spain. Why would Olivia say she saw her in Miami and with another man? I finished shopping in a daze, barely aware of what I was putting in the cart. Driving home, Olivia's words played on a loop in my head. There had to be a reasonable explanation, I told myself. Maybe Olivia had mistaken someone else for Sophia. Or maybe Sophia's work sent her to Miami for a brief stop before Spain. But no matter how I tried to justify it, a sinking feeling took hold by Monday. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I couldn't stand the uncertainty. I needed to know the truth. I decided to call Sophia's office, disguising my voice, to avoid raising suspicion. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. Good morning, Sterling Enterprises. How may I direct your call? A receptionist chirped on the other end. Hi there. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Deepening my voice. I'm an old client of Sophia's trying to reconnect. Could you transfer me to her? The receptionist paused. Oh, I'm sorry. Sophia is currently on leave. Check. Be back in about 3 weeks. I swallowed hard on leave. Yes, she replied. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Her husband injured his leg and she's taking time off to help him recover, so thoughtful of her. Would you like to leave a message? I hung up without another word, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. Sophia had told them she was at home caring for me, a lie. So calculated, it almost sounded plausible. But here I was perfectly healthy and completely unaware of the story she'd spun. My heart pounded as reality set in. She wasn't in Spain. She wasn't working. The only explanation was that Sophia had crafted an elaborate cover for something entirely. Olivia's comment about Miami made sense. Now Sophia was with someone else, living it up while I sat at home, oblivious. A bitter anger bubbled up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Sophia was clever, and if I acted impulsively, she'd just find a way to cover her tracks again. No, I needed proof, cold. Undeniable proof. She was going to pay for this, but I had to be smart about it that afternoon. I left work early, telling my boss. I felt sick. I didn't waste a moment. I searched online for a divorce attorney and found Daniel Ross, a highly rated lawyer known for handling cases like mine. Within hours, I was sitting in his office, recounting everything. Sophia's trip to Spain, Olivia's revelation about Miami and the lies she told her workplace. Daniel listened attentively, his expression calm and calculating. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You have 2 options. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You gather evidence. If you cut her in the act, it will strengthen your case. We can use infidelity to protect your asset, possibly even claim damages. I clenched my fists, dreading the thought of waiting. And the second option? Daniel nodded. Act quickly. Secure your shared savings before she has a chance to access them. Once the funds are protected, we file for divorce. She'll come back to find her options limited. My mind raced. Protecting our savings was my top priority. It was money we'd worked hard to save, and I couldn't let her take it. Let's move forward with that, I said firmly. Daniel's plan was meticulous over the next few days. I followed his instructions to the letter, moving the savings into an account solely in my. Each transaction felt like a step toward reclaiming control. By the end of the week, the divorce papers were ready. All I had to do was wait for Sophia to come home. When she walked through the door, expecting life to resume, as usual, she would find the reality she had created, waiting for her. The week leading up to Sophia's return was surreal. I went about my daily routine like a robot, but every moment I wasn't working or preparing meals was spent going over the details of our plan. Daniel had assured me that everything was in place. The savings were secured, and the divorce papers were ironclad. All I had to do was wait. The waiting wasn't easy. My thoughts spun constantly, bouncing between anger and heartbreak. Part of me still wanted to believe there was some explanation for all of this, but the facts were undeniable. Olivia had seen Sophia with another man in Miami and her office. Believed belied. She was home taking care of me, I couldn't rationalize those lies anymore. The day of her return arrived faster than I'd expected. Sophia stepped out of a taxi in front of the house, her suitcase in hand, and a spring in her step. She looked radiant, her skin glowing with a tan, and her hair lighter from days in the sun. The sight of her filled me with a strange mix of emotions. There was still a flicker of love there, buried beneath the anger and betrayal. I watched through the window as she approached the front door. I wasn't the one to greet her when she inserted her key into the lock. The door swung open before she could turn it. Laura stood there, smiling, wanly, her posture casual, but confident. Standing beside her was her son, who looked to be about 10 years old, holding a basketball under one arm. Sophia froze, her face a mask of confusion. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Who are you? And what are you doing in my house? Sophia's tone was sharp, her eyes darting between Laura and Ethan. Laura's smile didn't falter. You must be Sophia. Brightly, Alex mentioned, you'd be stopping by to pick up your things. Sophia blinked, her confusion deepening. She glanced down at her suitcase, then back at Laura. I don't understand. What are you talking about picking up my things? Laura tilted her head slightly, her smile softening into something almost pitying. I'm Laura and this is my son. We just moved in. It's such a beautiful house. She gestured lightly to the space behind her. Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to panic. Moved in? What do you mean? This is my house. Laura gave her a patient look as though explaining something to a child. Oh, I'm sorry. Alex told you he ended the lease last week. Everything's official now. My son and I are just settling in. She stepped aside, gesturing toward a few neatly stacked boxes in the hallway. Your things are in the garage. Alex was thoughtful enough to pack them for you. Sophia's suitcase hit the porch with a dull thud as she let it slip from her hand. Her face turned pale as she stared at Laura, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. She took a shaky step forward, gripping the doorframe for support. That's impossible. Alex wouldn't do that. This is our house. Laura's expression softened further, but there was a glint in her eye that made it clear. She knew exactly what she was doing. I'm really sorry. You're going through this, she said gently. Alex thought it would be better for everyone to have a clean break. It was time to move forward. Sophia shook her head, her voice rising with desperation. This has to be some kind of mistake. I'm Alex's wife. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed my number. When I answered, my tone was calm, and even though my heart was pounding. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She practically shouted, her voice trembling. What is going on? There's some woman in our house. Saying, she lives here. Now what is this? I took a deep breath, letting the moment settle before replying. Sophia, I ended the lease. The house belongs to Laura and her son. Now I figured it was time to make a clean break. A stunned silence before she found her voice. You ended the lease without telling me. Why would you do that? Her tone was laced with disbelief. I continued, keeping my voice steady. Your things are in the garage. Laura was kind enough to let me leave them there until you got back. You should probably thank her. Sophia's voice cracked as she tried to respond, her words coming out in a rush. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What are you talking about? We built this life together. You can't just throw me out. Letting a cold edge slip into my tone. Oh, and one more thing. There's a folder on the passenger seat of your car. It's got the divorce papers in it. Sign them whenever you're ready. Sophia. And I'll see you in court. Before she could respond, I hung up. My heart pounded in my chest as I blocked her number. It wasn't easy, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The hardest part was over. Sophia stood on the porch for a long moment, staring down at her phone as if will it to ring again. When it didn't, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, her expression hardening without another word. She turned and headed for the garage. Laura and Ethan watched her go, their calm expressions unchanged. Inside the garage, Sophia found a few neatly packed boxes stacked against the wall. She spotted the folder sitting on the passenger seat of her car and snatched it up, her hands trembling as she opened it. The bold letters on the front read, "Divorce papers." Her chest tightened as she flipped through the pages, each line feeling like a nail in the coffin of her life. As she'd known, tears welled up in her eyes as she climbed into her car. She clutched the steering wheel, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps with no other options. She started the engine and drove off, unsure of where to go. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but questions and regrets. 5 days later, I sat in the courthouse. For the first hearing, Sophia was visibly furious, her anger spilling over into accusations and harsh words. She tried to paint me as controlling, even going so far as to suggest I'd manipulated the situation to trap her. But I stayed calm, leaning on Daniel's advice to remain composed. The judge listened carefully to both sides. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was clear. Sophia's case was flimsy. She hadn't anticipated that. I'd come prepared with evidence of her lies. The betrayal was clear, and a courtroom felt heavy with the weight of it. By the end of the session, I felt drained, but resolute. The hardest part was facing the woman I'd once loved, and realizing just how far she'd gone to betray me. Still, I knew I'd done what I had to do to protect myself and my future. That evening, I met up with some old friends at a local bar. I hadn't told them much about the divorce, just that things hadn't worked out. They respected my silence, sensing I wasn't ready to dive into the details. As we traded stories and shared laughs, I felt a flicker of normalcy returning. But when one of them mentioned a recent trip to Miami, my chest tightened. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I realized there might be one more truth I needed to uncover as I sat with my friends in the bar. The mention of Miami hit me like a lightning bolt, John. One of my college buddies was talking about Noah, another friend from our group. Apparently, Noah had just gotten back from a trip. Where'd Noah go again? Keeping my tone casual. Miami, John said, shrugging. He didn't give us many details, but it sounded like he had a good time. Probably some girl knowing him. My jaw tightened. Noah, Miami. The coincidence was too big to ignore. Olivia had said Sophia was in Miami with a man. Could it have been Noah? My mind raced and my chest burned with anger at the thought Noah had always been a bit of a flirt. But I never imagined he'd cross a line like this. Where is he tonight? Trying to sound nonchalant, J.Ant smirked. Probably out doing the same thing he was doing in Miami. You know. Noah. I forced a chuckle, but my stomach churned. If Noah had been with Sophia, I needed to know. And if he had proof photos, messages, he could solidify everything. A plan began to form a few days later. I orchestrated a casual hangout with the guys, making sure Noah would be there. We met at a different bar and Noah showed up looking relaxed, a slight tan still visible. I couldn't help but feel a surge of disgust as he greeted me, like nothing was wrong. As the night went, I steered the conversation toward vacations. So Noah, what's Miami like? Keeping my voice light, thinking about going there myself. His usual confident attitude shining through Miami's great beaches bars. Good vibes. You'd love it. Got any pictures? I pressed, trying not to let my eagerness show. I'm looking for inspiration. Noah hesitated for a moment before pulling out his phone. He unlocked it, scrolling through his gallery to find some shots here. Holding the phone out, I snatched it before he could react, and his face instantly changed. Hey man, give it back. Not yet. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My tone, cold. John and the others caught on quickly, standing between Noah and me to keep him from grabbing the phone. What are you doing? Noah sputtered, rising with panic. Just taking a quick look. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. As I scrolled through his photos, my heart sank as I found exactly what I'd feared. Pictures of Noah and Sophia together. There they were, laughing on a beach, clinking glasses at a bar, arms around each other, like they didn't have a care in the world. Each photo felt like a punch to the gut, but I kept going, sending them to my own phone, one by one. Come on. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Noah tried to reach for the phone, but Joe held him back. You're not getting it back until he's done, John said, his voice hard with disgust. As I flipped through more images, I found text messages between Noah and Sophia. They were flirtatious, even explicit at times. My stomach churned as I skimmed the conversations. Same lies Sophia had told to make her so-called business trip believable. I sent the messages to myself too, ensuring I had everything I needed. Then I tossed the phone back to Noah. Thanks for sharing. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice dripping with sarcasm. Noah's face was red, and he looked around at the group, desperate for support. But none of the guys were on his side. You crossed a line. Man, John said, his tone cold. We had a code. You don't mess with another guy's wife. Noah stammered, trying to defend himself. But the damage was done. The rest of us walked out, leaving him sitting alone. His betrayal laid bare. I presented the photos and messages to my lawyer. The next day, Daniel was impressed by how thorough the evidence was with this. Sophia had no leverage left. The next court hearing was swift and decisive. The judge reviewed everything. Her lies, the proof of infidelity, and the money I had secured before she could access it. Sophia's case crumbled by the time the divorce was finalized. I retained the savings and walked away without losing anything. Sophia, on the other hand, was left with nothing but the consequences of actions. After the divorce, I heard through mutual friends that Sophia and Noah had tried to make their relationship work. It didn't last. The thrill of their affair quickly faded under the weight of what they'd done. Within 2 months, they'd broken things off, their reputations in shambles. Friends who once welcomed them into their lives now wanted nothing to do with them. The betrayal had come deep, but I knew I'd come out stronger. The anger and heartbreak were replaced by a sense of clarity. I had my savings, my freedom, and a fresh start. I began focusing on rebuilding my life, surrounding myself with people I could trust. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my new place, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the pain, it had all brought me to this moment. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs for the first time in months. I felt truly at peace. The future was mine and I was ready to move forward. Here's the next story. So it all began with what she dubbed the prank of the year. Halloween, correct. I should have known Neva as usual. Couldn't stop herself from bragging about being the focus of attention. But this year, she went too far. Way too far. It was one of those wild Halloween parties we host every year. The kind where the house is packed with our friends, her friends, and a slew of people we barely know half the time. Eva was in her element, socializing and laughing, too loudly, ensuring she was at the center of every joke. I was fine with it, drinking my drink, and nodding along, simply trying to get through the night. I'd seen her in this state before, as if the party existed. So, to boost her ego, she then began teasing about a spectacular surprise she had planned for later. Everyone was chatting and murmuring as if they couldn't wait to see what she would do. I assumed it was another of her silly tricks. They enjoy pranks, always pushing the line just enough to elicit reaction, but never truly crossing it until this time. Around midnight, she summoned me in front of everyone, and I already disliked the expression in her eyes. Too playful. She was overconfident. But whatever. Right. This Halloween, she was just getting pumped up, when she brought out a blindfold, grinning, as if she was ready to transform my life. All of our visitors were chanting for me to play along. Part of me hesitated. I'm not fond on surprises, especially not in Ava's current temper, but with half the party watching and encouraging me, I figured what the hell. So, here I am blindfolded, standing in the middle of our living room with Ava surrounding me, like a cat with the mouse. I heard her mention something to one of our pals. More laughs, and the music fades to virtually nothing. My instincts were telling me that something was AI. My heart was hammering, but I held it together. I had no idea what she was planning to do. Just as I felt her move behind me, I heard another voice. A man's voice sounded close. His breath was right next to my ear. My pulse quick. I think this has already gone too far. What type of prank was this? The room fell still for a few moments before. A faint giggle broke through the tension and hands other than hers were placed on my shoulders. I ripped off the blindfold, heart thumping, expecting to see someone messing around. But when I turned, my stomach fell. It was not a prank. Not the way I expected. He stood in front of me, beaming as if he had just won eyes. Was Jake, our neighbor. He had his arm around Ava, like if he owned the area, as if he had been waiting for this very time. The room erupted in awkward laughter, but my ears rang, drowning it out. I locked eyes with Ava, but she didn't flinch, did not look. Sorry. Surprise, she said with a scornful tone to her voice. I felt like I should be laughing with them, but all I saw was Jake's smug expression, and the way her body leaned into his, too familiar and too cozy. It wasn't simply a joke. This was something far worse. For a minute, I remained motionless. My brain was still comprehending what was going on. I stood there, motionless, seeing the lady I'd been calling my wife, merely draped over Jake, as if it were the most natural thing on the planet. The room around me was filled with anxious laughing, but I scarcely heard any of it. But the hell is this? Attempting to maintain a steady voice, but it cracked in the middle. My face became hot and a cold wave of rage flooded in as my hands clenched into fists. I believed this was a hoax, some sick Halloween joke, but no one was laughing now. Not really. She didn't even back away from him. She inclined her head to the side, giving me the expression she gives when she thinks I'm being too serious. I feel like I'm the one making things weird. Oh, don't be so theatrical, she remarked, rolling her eyes. It's only Jake. Relax. Was she insane? Just Jake. Why the hell is only Jake treating you like that? My voice came out louder than I intended, and I could feel everyone's attention on us. The music had completely stopped, and the air felt thick, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Jake didn't say anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He did not. He just stood there, grinning, as if he was part of a private joke that I was definitely excluded from. I wanted to hit him. Right. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Just take that arrogant expression off his face. But I had to hear her say it. I needed her to admit it, even though everything inside of me was shouting the truth. Ava simply shrugged, as if it were no big deal with it been hanging out. Do you know how close Jake and I are? I repeated, my voice, full of disbelief. Do you think this looks like hanging out? She eventually took a step back from him, but not because she felt guilty. She seemed annoyed that I was making a scene and participating in whatever twisted game this was. Look, it's harmless. As if we were discussing a spilled drink. Not this. It is Halloween. Everyone is having fun. Why do you have to make things weird? I couldn't believe what I heard. Why do I have to make things weird? My mind was racing, trying to figure out how we got to this point. Was this a sick fantasy? Had she planned this the entire time? Or had I simply been blind to everything? The worst part was, I had no idea how long this had been going on. How many times had Jake been to our house? Right below my nose. And what the hell did hanging out mean? To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I moved closer, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. How long, Eve? A second? How long has this been going on? It was only a brief minute, I thought. I noticed something in her eyes. Guilt, perhaps. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But it was shortly gone, replaced by chilly indifference, which was killing me more than any confession. Could she folded her arms across her chest in fence. Now, why does this matter? It's not really a huge deal. Not a huge deal. I felt like my head was going to explode. Was she really downplaying this? My entire existence was being ripped apart right in front of me, and she was acting as if I was overreacting. I looked around at our pals who were still standing there, pretending not to see, but I knew they did. How long did they know? Did they know at all? Were they all waiting for this moment for the huge prank to come to fruition? I could not handle it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and walked out of the home, the chilly night air hitting me like a smack on the face. But nothing could quench the fire that burned within me as I strolled down the street. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Avora sent a message. You are overreacting. It's not, as you think, but I didn't have to think anymore. I had seen enough. So I stared at the message, feeling the weight of her words. She must have had a lot of nerve to send that. Not what I thought. What was she attempting to sell me right now? I took every step away from that place. And I felt like I was getting away from the life I knew, but at the same time, it felt like I was waking up from a dream that I had been foolish enough to believe in for far too long. I placed the phone back into my pocket and continued walking, attempting to pull everything together. My mind was racing, but memories came flooding back, that I'd been too blind to trusting to see before. Small things, like how she had recently begun to spend more time at Jake's house, always with an excuse that did not sit well with me. Oh, Jake has a new setup for movie evenings. Or I'm assisting Jake with his dog. He's been too busy to deal with it personally. And I believed her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why shouldn't I? Jake has been our neighbor for several years. We'd grilled burgers with him, had beers and laughed at silly jokes at the bar. It never occurred to me that there might be more going on behind the scenes. But all of those times seemed like puzzle pieces coming into place. She'd had late-night texts from him. We had phone calls and inside jokes that didn't involve me every time I questioned it. She dismissed me. I told myself. I was paranoid and overthinking things. I wanted to trust her and them both. I did not want to be that envious, insecure husband that overthinks things. Except now everything was right in front of me. I kept going till I got to a tiny park, a few blocks away. The swings groaned in the wind and the street lights cast long shadows across the empty playground. I sat on one of the benches, holding in my hands, attempting to quiet the storm in my chest. How had I been so blind? How had I missed all of the signs? More importantly, how had she convinced me that it was all for nothing? I replayed the night in my memory, her leaning toward Jake as if it were natural, his hand casually resting on her hip as if it had happened 1,000 times before. She didn't flinch and didn't try to hide it. That was the part that hurt the most. She was not ashamed. No guilt. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. As if I were an inconvenience getting in the way of her enjoyment. I felt unreasonable for even questioning. What was going on? My phone vibrated again. Another message. I hesitated, my finger hanging over the screen before swiping to read it. Can we discuss this? When you've calmed down, you have blown it out of proportion, exaggerating the situation. I couldn't believe all I was reading. I was sitting here, hardly able to hold myself together while she was, presumably still in the party, pretending I was having an emotional breakdown about nothing, as if seeing her with Jake wasn't enough evidence that something was very wrong. I wanted to yell and shatter something, but instead, I texted back, my hands shaking from fury and amazement, exaggerating the situation. I saw you with him. Are you did not even bother to hide it. There was a gap before her next communication arrived. It felt like she was trying harder, as if she knew I wouldn't just give up and accept her explanations. Look, I realize how it may have appeared, but nothing is going on between me and Jake. It was only a joke, a silly Halloween trick. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You've been stressed out recently, so I thought it'd be fun to tease you a bit. I did not intend for it to go this far. A joke. She was still pushing that angle, attempting to deceive me into believing I had dreamt everything, that it was all just a harmless prank that I had overreacted to. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Couldn't. I wasn't going to let her spin this into something. It was not. I stood up from the bench and paced back and forth, my thoughts racing. Was this truly who she was? Someone who would humiliate me in front of our friends, and then lie to my face about it. Later, I spent years with this woman, believing we were creating a life together, trusting her more than anyone else in the world. And now it was as if the ground beneath my feet had split open, revealing something I didn't want to know. But I couldn't look away any longer. This was not just a hoax. This was a betrayal one. She was not even sorry for. I sent one last text before putting the phone back in my pocket, this time with finality. Come clean. I am not a F. Asters Kenji idiot. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nogan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The truth was out there, hovering in the air between us. I knew it. She knew it. There was no going back. The phone didn't buzz again for a long, and I wasn't sure. I wanted it to the air felt thick about me, like if I were expecting a bomb to drop, but didn't know. When I sat back down on the seat, staring at the empty street, I wondered how the heck I was meant to handle this. My thoughts kept going in circles. Was this just a prank? No, I'd seen Jake's nonchalant way of looking at her and touching her as if it were nothing new. That kind of consolation did not come from a one-time joke. It came from something deeper, something that had been growing for who knows how long. Just as I was about to stand up and walk home, my phone lit up again. Another communication from her. Fine if you want to discuss it. Come back. But don't think I'm the only one to blame here. You have been distant for months. You hardly notice me anymore. Maybe I got too close to Jake, but this is because you checked out. Don't think I'm insane for desiring attention there. It was the shift, the moment. She chose to turn this entire catastrophe back on me. The classic move. I could almost hear her voice. That deceptive tone she employed when she sought to change the story to make herself appear as the victim. Suddenly, it was no longer about her treachery. It was about my being distant and not giving her the attention she required. I felt my blood boil, and my fingers grip around the phone. How dare she? How can she try to blame this on me? I wasn't the one sneaking around with my neighbor. I was not the one who crossed boundaries and disrespected our marriage. But now, she was claiming that this was my fault. as if I had somehow coerced her into Jake's embrace. I didn't know how to answer. There was too much going on in my thoughts. There is too much rage and hurt. But before I could think of what to say, my phone rang. It was Ava. I hesitated for a second, before swiping to respond. "Are you done having a tantrum?" she exclaimed, her voice shrill, breaking the silence. On the other end, "No apologies. There is no guilt." She was just furious because I wasn't following the rules. "Old tantrum. Are you calling this a tantrum?" I shot back, my voice straining. "I caught you. Ava, you went all over Jake in front of everyone. And now you're attempting to make this my fault. As if I hadn't been doing everything I could to keep this marriage together while you were out there, making me seem foolish." She let out an exaggerated sigh. "I'm not trying to make you look stupid. You are doing it on your own. By exaggerating this situation, nothing occurred. Okay, Jake and I have just been spending time together since, quite frankly, you have been checked out. I needed to talk to someone." "What? And you weren't present?" I couldn't believe what I heard. "So you believe being so close to him is the answer?" I was humiliated in front of everyone. She did not answer immediately. I could hear her breathing from the other end, probably planning her next move. But when she eventually spoke, her tone was chilly and disconnected. "You have been neglecting me for months. And yes, I got close to Jake. He pays attentive. He really cares. Perhaps if you'd done the same, we would not be having this debate." I felt like I had been slapped across the face. She was actually doing it. She was basically shifting all of the responsibility onto me, as if getting intimate with Jake was a reasonable response to my inattention. "Is that your excuse?" "To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfair increased enthusiasm." With a quiet voice. "Dangerous that I have not been paying enough attention to you. So you start spending all of your time with him and touching him. Like that, flirting with him. Right in front of me. Do you expect me to just what?" "To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I'm not claiming to be perfect," she snapped. "But maybe if you weren't so preoccupied with your own world, you'd have seen how miserable I've been." I was speechless. Unhappy. She had never mentioned being unhappy. We had our disagreements, yes, but nothing that suggested she felt this way. Even if she was, why was her first response to run to Jake, rather than talk to me? But then somewhere in the back of my mind, I recognized this wasn't so new. Perhaps she had been unhappy for a time, and I could now see that Jake was only the tip of the iceberg. How long had this been happening behind my back? How many times did she lie? He smiled in my face as he slipped away from me. "Has anything happened between you two?" I inquired, my voice trembling, barely holding it together. And I vow to God, if you lie to me. There was a prolonged pause. "Is it too long?" She finally responded no, but her voice sounded strange. Nothing occurred, but I did not believe her. Couldn't. There was no way she could be that comfortable with him with nothing else behind her. "Do you actually expect me to believe that?" My throat constricting based on what I witnessed in how you interacted with him tonight. "Believe what you want." Her voice frigid again. "But I am not going to sit here and gravel. Just because you can't take a little flirtation. Perhaps, if you had paid attention to me, we wouldn't be here." So there it was. The disguise finally came off, and I saw her for he truly was. This was not about me. It was not about us. It was about her, and her selfish desire to be liked, to feel like the center of someone's universe. She wasn't concerned about what this did to me, how it broke everything I believed we had. She only cared about herself. And I knew right then that this was not going to go the way she expected. Her words lingered in the air, like poison, twisting further into my chest. With each breath, I was done trying to understand. I've given up on attempting to see things through a distorted lens. Everything she said made my thoughts scream. Her voice is still reverberating, like a bad dream. They're blaming me. She actually had the audacity to call it such. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. The fact that she was with Jake was hardly the worst part for me. It was how she spoke to me, as if I were inconvenience, as if my emotions didn't matter at all. Her self-righteousness, the way she dismissed what she'd done. It explained all I needed to know. I said, attempting to keep my voice quiet. Every part of me wanted to yell. If you think this is all about flirting, you're missing the point. This is not just a silly misunderstanding. You embarrassed me tonight in front of everyone and you didn't care. She chuckled, as if I was saying something absurd. Oh my God, you're acting as if I committed a crime. I assured you it was harmless. Stop being overly theatrical. That laugh, that icy contemptuous sound struck me harder than any of her words could. My pulse raced in my ears and my fist clenched at my sides. I'd never felt so enraged. Not once in my life. I could handle her excuses, including the lies. But the way she laughed at my sorrow, that was the last straw. I, like you to respond. I spoke, slowly and steadily, but I could feel the wrath rising beneath the surface. How long has this been going on with Jake? I mean, the truth, not the version you are attempting to feed me. There was silence on the other end of the telephone. No more excuses. No more putting it off. She knew this time was different when she finally spoke up. Her voice had lost its sharpness. There was no regret either. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's just weariness. As if she was tired of faking. Okay, she mumbled. Do you want the truth? I'm not sure when it started. It's just happened. Jake. And I clicked. He listens and pays attention to me. Yeah, maybe I went too far. But I'm not going to apologize for needing someone who sees me. My chest clenched, and the words struck me like a sledgehammer. She just admitted it. She was not even faking anymore all this time. While I was trying to keep us afloat and keep her happy, she was running to Jake for attention. And now she was acting as if I should accept it, as if I had no right to feel deceived. So, you have been cheating on me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Gently, the words tasting strange in my mouth. Saying it aloud made it real. It was no longer a mere suspicion or concern. This was the truth. Ava did not deny it. She did not even try instead. She sighed, as if she were fatigued by the whole situation. I would not call it that, really. I spat back, my rage finally bursting through. So, what would you call it then? Because it appears to be just that from my vantage point. You've seen him behind my back, lying to me, and demeaning me in front of others. So, except cheating, what else is? It's not that straightforward. She explained, her voice defensive once more. It's not like I planned it. Okay, it's just happened. Besides, nothing physical ever occurred. We never do, you know. So to answer your question, no, I did not cheat. I nearly chuckled at the foolishness of it. She genuinely thought she could just draw an arbitrary line in the sand. And everything would be fine. That simply because they hadn't crossed that boundary, I was supposed to overlook it. You're unbelievable. I shook my head, despite the fact that she couldn't see me. You assumed that because you didn't cross some technical line. Do you think that alters the fact that you betrayed me? That you had been sneaking around with him? I could hear her pacing at the other end of the telephone. Her breath quickens. She was not used to me pushing back in this way. In the past, I would always back down and try to make things right. This time, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Things were different this time. I wasn't going to let her trick me into thinking this was. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Look, I apologize. If you think I crossed a line, she said with half-hearted tone. However, I do not think it is fair to term this cheating you, and I have been separated for months. I don't want to hear another word about how remote I am. I cut half my voice cold. This is not about me. Both is about you did it. You manufactured this mess. And now, you're blaming it on me, because you can't accept the fact that you messed up. She didn't say anything for a while. I could hear her breathing and the frustration in the silence between us. I wondered if she was finally understanding. She couldn't spin this anymore, that she couldn't talk herself out of it, like she used to when she finally talked. Her voice was low and harsh. So what happens now? Are you going to keep this over my head forever? Or will we genuinely talk like adults? It was nearly laughable. She was still trying to turn the tables, appearing as if this were a trivial issue. We could just speak it through. No, Ava. Til my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Hearts out thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice calm and determined. We're not talking through this. There's nothing to talk about anymore. The weight of my words sank in, and for the first time in the night, I felt a peculiar clarity. I felt like I had been lost in a fog for months and everything was finally obvious. This was not anything we could change. I wasn't going to let her lies, excuses and selfishness get me down anymore. This is over, I replied strongly. I am done. I hung up the phone. The hush that ensued was deafening, but for the first time in a long time, I felt able to breathe again. When I hung up, the silence seemed odd. Not the kind of quiet that brings you calm, but the kind that makes your heart pound in your ears, filling the place where 1,000 words should have been. My palm trembled as I set the phone down on the bench beside me. I wasn't sure if it was the cool night air or the excitement rushing out of my system. However, I immediately felt empty. It was over. I said it. And what shocked me the most was not the finality of it, but how confident I was. This was not anything I could fix, and I were not going to sit down, talk it out and put ourselves back together. She had shattered something. No amount of apologies or explanations could bring it back into place. The weight of that realization overwhelmed me for a minute, making it difficult to breathe. I built a life with her. I believed. We had it. Everything crumbled in the course of a single discussion. I sat there, staring out at the deserted park, trying to figure out what I should do next. My phone vibrated again. Aval, no doubt. But I did not even glance at it. Couldn't. There was nothing left to say instead. I began thinking about the previous several months, the little indicators that I had disregarded, or perhaps didn't want to see, were the late evenings when she claimed to be with her friends, when she was engrossed to her phone, beaming at a text. She never showed me the justification she used when she arrived home late. When I questioned where she had gone, she gave imprecise responses. Everything seemed so obvious. Now I'd been the fool, assuming she was just going through a phase that work was stressing her out, or that she simply needed space. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, hoping that she'd come around, and we'd figure things out together, but she was not attempting to figure anything out. She was looking for an escape, which she found in Jake. What is the worst part? She didn't care enough to hide it. She was brash, irresponsible, and paraded it in front of our friends, as if nothing mattered. The memory of her leaning against him and giggling, his arm wrapped around her, it made my stomach churn. I'd been standing there, blindfolded and oblivious, while the rest of the room had most likely realized what was going on. Long before I did, I wondered how many people had seen it. How many people know about Jake and Ava? Were they all laughing behind my back? The humiliation was burning in my chest, but I pushed it down. I couldn't handle that. On top of everything else, I knew I could not stay in that park indefinitely, no matter how much I longed to sit there, lost in the silence. I had to return to the house. Eventually, I had to confront her, but the thought of walking back into that area, knowing she was still there, knowing he could still be there, it made me nauseous. But I couldn't hide from this. I needed to tackle it. Head on. I rose up, the cold air stinging across my flesh, and began going back. Every step felt heavier than the last. It felt like I was dragging my entire existence behind me. By the time I got to the street, the house's lights were still on and soft music was playing from inside. The majority of the visitors had undoubtedly left by now, but I could still hear a murmur of voices. I moved up to the door and halted briefly, my hand on the handle. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Perhaps she'd be gone, but she had packed and departed, knowing what was coming. But I knew better. Ava never avoided conflict. She thrived on it. She'd be waiting, probably with another set of excuses or worse. She'd sit there, cool and collected, as if none of this had affected her. That notion alone sent a new wave of rage through me, but I suppressed it. I opened the door and she was seated on the couch, browsing through her phone, as if nothing had occurred. She didn't even look up as I stepped in. "Did you come back?" she said with a flat tone, as if she expected me to depart. Perhaps they hoped for it. I stood there, looking at her, waiting for anything. She apologized, shed a tear, and expressed regret for anything she had done. But there was nothing, just the cold, disinterested expression she'd been giving me all night. "Are you still here?" My voice sounding weird in my own ears. "Hello," she moaned, and eventually looked up, locking eyes with me. "Where else might I go? And I won't leave just because you're having a meltdown." That was it. That was all she needed to say. No apologies or remorse. I just tightened my fists, resisting the temptation to yell and fling everything back at her. But I did not. I was too exhausted for it. I was too exhausted by the whole incident to respond in the way she was expecting. "We're finished," I replied, my voice low, but forceful. "I'm not doing it anymore. You can't sit there and behave as if I'm the one who's overreacting. You lied. You cheated. And now you want to pretend it wasn't a big deal. I am done." She blinked, revealing a spark of emotion. Surprise, perhaps. Or maybe you're angry. Couldn't tell. "What exactly are you talking about? Are you just going to walk away from this from us?" "There's no longer us," I responded, shaking my head. "Whatever we had is gone. You made sure of that. So yeah, I am walking away." She glanced at me for a bit, and for the first time, that night, I recognized something genuine in her expression. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." She realized I meant it. For the first time, that night, her facade had cracked. I noticed a glimmer of panic in her eyes. She stepped up from the couch, her phone falling out of her grasp and landing lightly on the carpet. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. I could see her mind spinning, trying to find out how to recontrol and turn this back in her favor. Ava was not used to losing. Not like this. "You are being silly." She eventually spoke. Her voice shook slightly. "Are you really going to toss away everything we've built over one foolish misunderstanding? I told you. It meant nothing to Jake. Why don't you just stop?" I interrupted by raising my hand. "Stop making this about what I can and cannot handle. This is not a misunderstanding. You did not make a mistake on purpose. You've been lying and disrespecting me for months. And I let it go, because I believed I had stopped choking back. As bitterness rose in my throat, I assumed you were the same person I married." Her expression, contorted, half hurt, half defiant. "I'm still that person. You're so caught up in your own world that you don't notice it." It was her move. It's always twisted back on me every single time. As if this were all my fault, though I had pushed her into Jake's arms. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. "Do not try to pull it on me," I remarked, moving closer. "You had a choice, and you selected him. You chose to insult our marriage and our confidence. And now, you want me to act like it was just a mistake. I am not buying it." She looked at me with desperation in her voice. Now I did not choose him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You and I have become rather distant lately. I wasn't sure what else to do. It is not like I planned any of this. Jake was just. He was present. But you weren't. I needed someone and you approached him. I concluded for her with a tense voice. Instead of communicating with me, for attempting to resolve issues, you made a choice. You briefly decided on Jake. The significance of my remarks hovered between us. Her eyes flickered away, and I realized she had no protection. This was it. This was the final performance, and the curtain had just dropped. But Ava was not one to back down, not even when she had been cornered. You believe you are so righteous. She shot back, her voice becoming more forceful. You think, just because you say we're done, means it's over. How about you have not been flawless either? You've been so focused on your work and life that you've scarcely noticed me. So yes, I became close to Jake. Maybe too close yet. He made me feel important. Her comments. Wounded, but not in the manner she meant. It was the same song with a different verse. She was not regretful about what she had done. She apologized for being caught. She was always attempting to reintegrate herself into the narrative in order to justify her mess. Do you honestly believe that excuses your actions? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Shaking my head. Do you believe that blaming me makes things okay? I don't know, she exclaimed. Her voice is breaking. Now I'm not sure what more to say. I'm trying to explain, but you aren't listening. You are just walking away. She took a step closer to me, and for a brief moment, I believed I saw something real in her eyes. Something rough. Perhaps she was recognizing what she had done. Unfortunately, it was too late. There was no going back now. She couldn't persuade herself out of this situation. And deep down, I believe she knew. I'm walking away. I spoke quietly, since this is not a mistake. About who you have become. You've become someone I don't recognize. She recoiled as if I had hit her. I could see terror developing in her eyes as she realized I wasn't going to back down this time, that I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation, the way she always did. Are you honestly going to give up on us? She inquired, her voice shaking after everything we've gone through. I am not giving up. I spoke softly, yet firmly. I am letting go. There is a distinction. The room felt uncomfortably heavy, and the air was thick with everything. We hadn't said the lies she'd told to keep me stuck in this loop for so long. I wanted to think she was still the lady I had fallen in love with, that we could somehow return to who we were. But the woman was gone, and Ava, the one standing in front of me, she was no longer herself. Where are we going from here? She inquired, her tone just above a whisper. The conflict had sapped her energy, and for the first time, she appeared hesitant, as if she didn't know how to play the next hand. We do not, I responded. The weight of those remarks is settling in. You'll receive your stuff. I will get mine. We'll go our separate ways. I'm done pretending that this can be fixed. Her eyes widened as panic flashed across her face. Again, you cannot be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. She stood there, looking at me as if I had just ruined her world. Maybe I did, but she crushed mine first. Long before night. Ava said nothing for a time. She simply stood there, biting her lip. Her arms folded over herself as if she were attempting to hold something in. I assumed she would cry, break down, and beg me to stay. However, she didn't. She simply looked away. Her shoulders slumped. The conflict had entirely drained her energy. She whispered, her voice hollow, "If that is what you want." I nodded, even though it felt like a knife was twisting in my chest. It's just what I need for a long time. We just stood there in the living room, our silence conveying more than anything we could say. We both knew it was finished. There was no turning back without another word. I turned and went for the door. I did not glance back. Couldn't. I wasn't sure if I'd have the strength to depart. But as I stepped out into the frigid night, one thing became very evident. I needed to let her go. And this time for good, I stepped out. The cold air hit me, like a wall piercing through my clothes and making me realize what had happened. I was leaving my wife, my house, and my whole life, as I knew it. That decision weighed heavily on me, but beneath it all was a peculiar sense of relief. It felt like I could finally breathe after months of being suffocated by her falsehoods. My feet moved themselves, but I had no notion where I was heading. The neighborhood was quieter. Now, the celebration was over with only the faint sound of a car in the distance, and the hum of street lights buzzing overhead. I returned my gaze to the home, only once to see the dim light still shining through the windows. Ava was probably sitting on the couch, shocked that I wasn't coming back. A part of me anticipated her to sprint after me, storm out and make one more attempt to persuade me to stay. But she did not. I believe she realized that. No amount of pleading or sweet-talking could cure the damage she had done. I got to the end of the street and paused, staring blankly at the crossroads ahead. Where the hell was I supposed to go from here? I couldn't keep traveling aimlessly through the night, and returning to that place was out of the question. The thought of sleeping in the same bed she'd used while thinking about Jake made my skin crawl. I needed some distance. I pulled out my phone and stared at the blank screen. No messages. No missed calls. She had given up. To a part of me was relieved, but another half was very disturbed. It still pained to think that she wasn't battling for me for us, that she would let me walk out that door without making any attempt to stop me. I opened my contacts and scrolled through the list. I did not want to trouble anyone at this hour, but I wanted to speak with someone who could help me make sense of the confusion in my thoughts. My fingertip hovered over my brother's name, but I paused. He'd been suspicious of Ava for months, often making comments about her strange vibes or how close she'd become to Jake, and I dismissed him every time, defending her, defending our marriage and saying he didn't understand. I was not ready to confess to him that he was correct. I scrolled down to find Greg's name. My oldest friend, the person who had known me since high school and had never judged me no matter how terrible things went. He'd be the one to help me get through it. The phone rang twice before he answered, sleepy and confused. It's about to, what's happening? I didn't even know where to begin. Hello, Greg. I need a place to crash tonight. I can't stay at my house. There was a pause and I could almost hear the gears spinning in his head as he awoke, trying to piece together the gravity in my voice. What happened? You and Dave get into it? Yeah. My voice, barely staying steady. Man, really terrible. I'll explain everything when I arrive. But I can't be there right now. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfazing patience, enthusiasm. Greg mumbled. Okay, come over. I will make up the couch. Do you want me to pick you up or something? No, I will walk. I am in need of air. Expressed my gratitude, but I still felt as if I was hovering outside of my body, watching myself go through actions. Thank you. No issue. His concern, clear in his tone. Now, just get here, safely. I hung up, shoved my phone back into my pocket and resumed walking. Greg's apartment was not far away. The distance was only a few streets, yet the trek seemed to last forever. As I walked through the silent neighborhoods, each step felt heavy with the weight of everything I was leaving behind mind. My imagination replayed the night in vivid detail. Her eyes, icy and distant, Jake's smug expression, as he stood next to her, as if I were the intruder. She justified herself by transferring the responsibility onto me, as if I had thrown her into his arms. The worst part, however, was her disinterest. She hadn't fought for me or begged for forgiveness. She would let me leave without a fight. I hated how much that stung. Even after everything, I wanted her to fight for us, to show that she cared. But she didn't. Perhaps she never had. Maybe all those evenings she spent at Jake's Hall, those benign text messages I pretended to ignore, were simply the beginning of something I couldn't see. Maybe she checked out long before I did. I arrived at Greg's house, with the porch light casting a pleasant glow over the driveway. I stood there for a while, taking it all in, anchoring myself before knocking Greg's door open a few seconds later. His face was partially obscured by the weak light, but I could see the concern imprinted on his countenance. "Come in, man," he murmured, stepping aside to allow me pasted. "You look like crap." "It feels like it," I grumbled, tossing my jacket to the floor as I stepped inside. The warmth of his home hit me, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. A modest jest. He'd probably planned the moment I called. He didn't ask for information right away, instead handing me a mug and sitting across from me on the couch. "You want to discuss it?" Gently, knowing I would respond. When I was ready, I peered into the coffee, watching the steam rise into the air. I didn't say anything for a long time, but eventually the words spilled out. I told him everything about the party, Jake and the horrific Halloween trick that had flipped my life upside down. I told him about Ava's justifications and lies, how she attempted to make everything about me, and how distant I'd purportedly been by the time I finished. My throat was sore and my hands had turned white from grasping the cup so firmly. Greg didn't say much while I spoke, just nodded, allowing me to express myself fully. When I finished, he sighed and leaned back into the sofa. "That is messed up, man," he replied, shaking his head. I knew something was wrong with her, but I didn't realize it was this terrible. "Do you honestly think it's over?" I nodded, the finality of it sinking into my chest, like a lead weight. "It is over. It must be. I can't stay in a marriage where I'm not respected and she's doing anything she wants with Jake." Greg did not argue with me. He only nodded again, his demeanor serious. "You did the correct thing by leaving. You do not deserve that." "I understand." I whispered it quietly, but that didn't make the pain any less. We sat there silently for a bit. The weight of the situation was weighing down on both of us. Ending a marriage is never easy, no matter how justified it is. Even though I knew it was the right decision, I still felt like I was mourning something. Mourning the life I thought I had, the person I assumed she was. "I'll be here for as long as you need," Greg spoke after a time, giving me a comforting nod. "We'll get through it, man." I managed a faint smile. I was grateful for his support, but deep down, I knew that getting through this would be much more difficult than simply stepping out the door. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.